you don't get to go too much higher than where you are. But we are loaded in. We're going to start this one off on 2,000 atmospheres as well. I'm going full Groundhog Day here, Zombie Grub. In the top right, we have the blue Zerg player. He is Elazer.
In the bottom left is the red Protoss. We have Lilbow. You a Lilbow or Lilbow?
Lilbow. Someone was referencing Lil Bow Wow, the early 2000s rapper. I can't say that I remember any of his music, but yeah. There you go. That one's been popping up in chat too much for me to not mention it. So shout out to you guys. You're in my brain now. Whether you want to be or not. Probe Scout coming in, sees the hatch. And well, I mean, let's talk about if this PVZ doesn't turn into like Sky Toss on like 3 or 4 bases versus a Queen Walk. What's your favorite thing to see? Is there something else that you like that players have been doing lately, Zombie Grub, at all?
I actually think that Blink Stalkers are quite fun to watch, so I've been a big fan of Trap's particular playstyle here because I think he's often less likely to go into like full-on triple Stargate type stuff. So I like Blink Stalkers. You know, maybe a Void Ray opener, sure, but into that nice Blink +1 attack. And I love the Lurker play from the Zergs that can happen as well. Against that, that's to me has got a little more. You know, it doesn't just kind of jump over to the late game. The best StarCraft games have kind of a very unique early, very unique mid, and very unique late game. Sometimes, you know, these matchups, they just kind of skip all the early and mid, and it's like, well, I really hope we have a lot to talk about, because if we're going to have to say, well, here's a second Stargate, guys, chat might get a little tired as well.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just making sure that I'm here. But yes, yeah, I think chat might also get a little tired. I might get a little tired if all we see our carriers and Void Rays all day in our PVZs. Zombie Grub, I'm not gonna lie. Variety is the spice of life, and I have managed to hard stick myself for most of my career in low Grandmaster because I like doing things that aren't normal, and I like seeing weird builds. And I want to see a little bit of that shakeup. So maybe if we get some trap style Blink Stalkers, that would be great. But that Stargate is finishing up for Lilbow. I think that if you're a Protoss player right now, it's also a little bit silly to dismiss the viability of these strategies, because at the end of the day, you're playing to win, you're playing for money, and no matter how mad anybody is about the way that you do it, it's paying your bills and putting food on the table. So, you know, you got to take those dubs where you can get them. And if all of those dubs come from carriers and fleet beacons, then so be it. Man's got to eat.
And if it's how it worked out against Elazer previously, then additional power to Lilbow for going for these Stargates. Because I did not get to see their previous series against each other. Lilbow took it 2-1 back in April, I believe. But that's not the Open Cups. You know, they are a little bit of a sign of how to expect things. Elazer doesn't play in them very often, so we don't really get this like totally size up Elazer at any given moment, any given week. You usually kind of wait for DreamHack a little bit, kind of like what we do with Raynor, where it's like, Raynor elsewhere is like, you know, it's different. Elazer just like, he really does come for the DreamHacks, less so for the Open Cups. But we have something at least a little different. It's not a second Stargate. It's a Twilight Council very quickly for Lilbow. And it is going to be a fast follow-up of Resonating Glaive, so certainly a way to get the Zerg into a false sense of security if they're like, oh, Void Rays again, how original. And they miss out on the Adepts, and that could be a lot of damage done. Or if they're being as greedy as, for instance, Bly was, where he skipped the Roach Warren, went right up to the lair, 4 bases, well, that also would be dangerous. But Elazer, not going to play just blindly predicting. He is going to grab a Roach Warren and at least have the proper structure to help him defend a bunch of Adepts.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, like, it's always weird with the Adept follow-up because the Roach Warren doesn't really seem like it has to mean anything. And if you're a Zerg player, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Roaches don't shoot up, so I don't want them against Void Rays or whatever other air unit that may be built to defend. However, these Adepts, are, well, they're not really known for their efficacy against the roaches specifically, because sometimes a lot of Zergs actually will build the roaches if they're going to do the queen walk, right? They're going to put Ravagers with them, try to bile down things like shield batteries and whatnot. So he's kind of already got what he needs to deal. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The queens are coming. He kind of has some of what he needs against the adepts, but there are still a lot of them, and I don't know. He's shading halfway across the map, but he's about to see the queens at his third base. This is just very awkward situation, Zombie Grub.
Yeah, what I was living hanging was that, like, well, Elazer has the roach warmed. He's going to make the roaches. Well, clearly, because he's actually doing an early game all in. He's made tons of roaches. They're now forced to retreat back home to deal with the adepts, because then it would have really been a base race. Now Elazer is kind of relying on his queens to take on a Nexus, which apparently is going to happen. That is actually happening. And then he hopes not to take any drone damage back at home, which so far so good. The adepts dangerously close to the drones being pulled this way and that, and finally into the main base, but actually still not deep onto the drones. These adepts are not where they should be to get maximum damage.
Oh, that's just painful, right? Gets the adepts across the map, but okay, now he's finally getting a couple of the drones, but losing that third Nexus, and the queens are still there. He still has to get rid of them. They're not going away. Even if he wanted to retreat with them, they're kind of a difficult unit to run away with, if we're being honest. So Sentry's going to get poked down, and the queens are still here, continuing to heal themselves and maintain this push. And with the rest of the roaches and ravagers coming over, I'm not really certain that there is a huge way out of this. The shield battery is going to put in some work, but the corrosive vials are heading down towards it. And let's not forget, of course, that two of the gateways are right here with a single pylon powering them. That is the majority of the production for our Protoss players. So as this gets knocked down, the ability to reinforce and try to defend this becomes exponentially more difficult. And he's at half the supply just about of the Elazer. I don't feel that there's too much more here Lilbow can do. He's going to tap out, and Elazer will take game number 1.
Pretty amazing watch them not kill each other at the last second there. The adepts lived, the roaches lived. Nothing was truly dying, but it was clearly going the way of Elazer, who had just kept on to his economy, kept on to his army. Still had all those queens alive too, which also would have taken a long time to actually kill. Not the way that Lilbow saw that going whatsoever. Elazer, I don't think he did that because he knew for a fact there'd be a follow-up adept build, so it probably wasn't exactly how he imagined it to go, but I think the crisis management was a little bit better for him, as well as just not just the micro for Elazer was better for him, but I think the amount, like the type of units he had were just a bit better at dealing with that situation. You know, the adepts, they got a shade, they got a focus fire, they got a split, where the roaches, you could just pull them back home and, surprisingly enough, let the queens and a handful of lings actually do damage.
Yeah, it really just boils down to a kind of unfortunate circumstance that, yeah, you go Stargate, you want to fake them out, sure, totally get that, totally understand. But one of the most common and popular strategies against Stargate openers to kill them early is a Queen March that is usually supplemented with Roaches and Ravagers, which just so happen to be pretty freaking good against the Adept. So if he was going for a normal macro build, then maybe he would have tried to just go up to Lair, get Evo Chambers and a Hydra Den, but that's not what happened. And you have to be really careful doing stuff like this because, I mean, at the end of the day, what really happened? He mind gamed himself out of doing something else that probably would have worked better against this. I imagine, since he immediately got killed, that, you know, there could have been a couple of other plays in his book that maybe would have handled this situation. But yeah, now he just kind of ends up in this awkward 0-1 spot after his build fell completely flat on its face. And we're going to go to Gigantha next, which is Elazer's pick. So I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens when we get into it. But things are looking pretty good for the Zerg. I was feeling it, and I'm happy to see he's kind of just doing his thing, really.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, he got to execute his build and win with it, right? Lilbow kind of got to execute his build, but it just wasn't going to be well set up to handle that push. Maybe if he had seen it coming from the beginning and been able to, like, slap a quicker robo down, buy enough time to an immortal, so on and so forth. But yeah, Elazer's the one who got to go, start to finish with his build. I will throw out that I think it's kind of a interesting position now in the second game. Elazer shows a queen walk in the first game. Doesn't mean he always will, but maybe shows a bit more push that direction. Lilbow could have gone for a Dark Shrine build, right? He had a Twilight Council, and the DTs could have come in, because we have seen that as almost a deterrent of these hatchery walks, right? If you think your opponent's going to do it multiple times, they literally cannot get detection without that lair. So the DT build as its own against a macro Zerg, maybe not the best, but deterring that queen walk, yes. Something that Elazer might be keeping in mind, something Lilbow might be keeping in mind, but I think in general, a lot more attention from Lilbow on the idea of like, okay, when am I going to be the one under attack? Which does give Elazer kind of the edge mentally. As we head in game 2, in the top right, it is Elazer at the F1.
And his opponent in the southwest position, the red Protoss player, trailing 0-1. He is Lilbow.
And I think this is an opportunity for Elazer to maybe go for a queen walk again, but just a bit of a later one, you know? Because I do think that that's option of the DTs can be a little scary. We've seen Trap use it versus multiple Zergs to actually throw a wrench into their plans, because it, you know, there's a certain percentage at which you predict Zergs to go for early attacks, and Elazer is certainly an aggressive guy. Kind of have him up there as well, but might all start off with Lilbow scouting. The probe adept, sure, but then maybe Oracle has more of a job to do this game.
Yeah, and maybe whatever he goes for this game is just going to be something that works a little bit better. Because you know you're kind of doing a strategy that's relying on your opponent not trying to punish you going for early Stargate, right? It's like I'm doing a build that's going to make you think I'm doing something, but the build that counters the thing you think I'm doing also counters what I'm actually doing. So if we can even just have like a bigger swing on that than what we had, like for example the DT thing that you brought up actually was I think a really good point, especially since those types of pushes aren't going to be coming with a layer behind them, right? So, and you've also, of course, we got to talk about when you're going across the map like Gigantith there, where you have the speed zones in the middle. That's going to help a little bit with those kinds of attacks, and you don't have a ramp that leads into that natural expansion, so you have that kind of spread out wide area. These are all things you have to consider, keep into account. You don't just have to hold on to that high ground. You need to be able to stop things like Ravagers on the front side. There is the Stargate for Lilbow, and whether it's just a Void Ray or a couple of Oracles, I think after the way that first game went, you might as well just try to force that late game and get that super army out, because it is quite popular for a reason, and the reason is not because it's bad.
That's not the reason. People doesn't want to prove something. It's just too solid of a build. It does protect you against all of the early game potential shenanigans. So we just never see any type of early roach push anymore, unless it's the queen walk. So, you know, a little bit later, still on hatchery tech. That's the next option for Zergs, since they know the Stargate can provide a defense of everything else. So the Overlord gets in and then is actually just going to try to escape and avoid being killed. It's kind of funny because the Overlord could just sacrifice itself and gain that knowledge faster, or just wait to die by the Void Ray. So it's like, either way, Elazer was going to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the reason why people do that too, right? Is they're like, okay, well now you know I have the Void Ray, that's where I go for the switch up, but no, it's the Oracle follow-up. With the third base, Pylon, Adept, these are all things super standard schmandard. And are we going to have him just get that second Stargate in a Fleet Beacon in early +1? Or will he perhaps try to do something like that Blink Stalker strategy that we were talking about earlier? Lilbow, you know, he kind of comes from a different time in StarCraft, but no, here we are. He's caught up to the times. He got that. He had that almanac from the future, and he's like, oh wait, I'm actually in the year where this is good. I'm going to do it. And here we are. So the second Stargate's going to come up. There is a Robo instead of that +1 being as quick as I'm like, where's the +1? Where is it? Is it a fake out? Is it all just a dream?
Oracle's still pretty important. Yeah, where is that +1? Just a little bit later then. I mean, he is getting a fairly quick robo to make sure that he has the option to get into Disruptor should he, sniff out a Queen Walk. I was also a little excited to maybe talk about Lilbow's previous history with the Blink Stalker, had we seen it, but oh well. Just know, guys, that Lilbow was one of the best non-Koreans at a time where Blink Stalkers were also heavily used, and he probably would have continued on doing, being one of the best if he had not. First, he wanted to practice for Legacy of the Void, and then he just went to Overwatch. But he's back now, and he is obviously in the meta, not just the double Stargate Void Rays, but also quick into the Disruptor option. Now, Elazer, he does have that creep marching forward steadily. His queens are coming over as well, and he's actually even getting a lair. And I think that is because he's a little, wary of the idea that if this is a Twilight Council, a DT could also be put as an option. Now, he negates that option. It's an investment that he doesn't really get to use for like roach speed or hitwire technology, but it gives him the option for one Overseer. If that was the way Lilbow was planning on defending. That's not the way Lilbow plans on defending. He's going to try and do so with Void Rays, Shield Batteries, and eventually a Disruptor, but the Robotics Bay only just finished.
Yeah, and here's this big attack coming up now, right? He's got a couple of the defensive cannons, but the Queen Walk again with the Roaches, with the Ravagers, dropping the vials down onto the Shield Battery, getting the Pylon, depowers the cannons, so they're not even in play anymore. He does still have one Shield Battery overcharge that can keep the Void Rays alive against this. That one will get brought down. There's still a couple of transfuses, though, so the Queen's able to do what they need to, and Lilbow just getting blasted over by that third base. Doesn't feel like there's going to be too much more he can do. Just there's too many queens that are still alive. He wasn't able to get on top of them. The Disruptor is going to be coming out in a moment. If those queens are all still clumped, could be a huge amount of damage. You have to get rid of the queens before those factor again.
Unfortunately, it's a bit too late, I think. Lilbow also got supply blocked, didn't realize he was dangerously close to being so, and then, of course, the pylons were one of the first targets. Had he not been supply blocked, he probably could have been able to get maybe one or two more Void Rays here. This second Disruptor would have come out a lot faster. That was also delayed by a supply block. It was already kind of bad news when his defensive start, all his stacked defense out in front was being broken as quickly as it was, but yeah, that supply block was the extra little brutal cherry on top. So now he loses his third Nexus, he loses his probes, and he also lost a good chunk of those Void Rays, which you could say, well, if he had retained them, maybe he's got a counter, but down to 2 Void Rays, it's not much of a counter.
Yeah, there's that +1 air coming up on the follow-up. It might be a little late to get the efficacy out of that kind of upgrade that he maybe was looking for earlier. Double Void Ray Colossus. Well, Void Ray Colossus, I don't feel like I've seen this composition rolled together like this in a while on a tournament match. It's almost like heartwarming to see a little bit of this. The Disruptors, of course, are going to give him that great anti-ground value, but at some point you just got to look at this and be like, okay, well, it's Lazer's going up to 5 bases, getting his hive, and Lilbow's just still on 2 Nexus right now. He's not in a position to comfortably move out and take that 3rd or the 4th. And that supply is going to show the impact of this over the course of this game. It is not a fun position to be in if you're Lilbow.
I really like Elazer's follow-up. That lair initially just for maybe Overseer. Obviously, when he pulls back, he starts to use it, but he didn't use it for roach speed or Hydralisk Den. He went straight up to a hive and the Spire. Still not bothering to upgrade his roaches in any factor. No evolution chambers either, right? So supremely high technology is what Elazer wants first. I guess just wanting that option of an abduct, a parasitic bomb, or just the ability to make corruptors, right? Like either one, both, if you can afford it, is the easier option because you don't need many. Lilbow is only at a finite amount of these kind of scary units. They'd be a lot scarier if there was more of them.
Yeah, and he's coming up with the Void Rays and the Colossi, but look at the number of queens. it's almost sickening. Of course, you've got the Spore Crawlers, which can not only hit the Void Rays, but the Colossus too, but he has so much presence. This army is just ginormous. And yeah, Void Rays and Colossi seem cool, but on 2-base economy, you're not building enough of them to bring down the maxed out Zerg force. And this army's going to kind of move down the ramp a little slowly. Few force fields by some time, but Disruptor Shot lands. However, I think there's still a little bit too much Zerg over here to break this position. Warp Prism is going to try to get one more rotation through. Is forced to cancel the warp in on the Biles, and there it is. GG, Elazer with the 2-0.
Elazer really